Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of this bill before this lower house today, the Child Protection Bill, and wish to commend it not only to this house but to the people of Barbados. It is one of the social transformational bills, pieces of legislation, that this particular administration continues to pass in this Parliament. It will replace some acts of ultimate vintage, one of which was enacted in a Parliament of Barbados when no Barbadian alive today was born in 1904, the Prevention of Cruelty to Children Act. And that act, if one were to look at it, had 15 sections, a schedule. It focused to some extent on punishment of children, the fines for breach of the act, $24. As you understand, it was $24 in those days was a lot of money. Absolutely anachronistic, passed in Victorian times as some pieces of legislation still, two which will be repealed here very shortly when the Child Justice Act, the brother or sister to this particular bill, or Child Justice Bill rather, the brother or sister to this particular bill comes before this Parliament. And, this bill seeks to advance the care and protection of one of what I regard as the four most vulnerable groups in our society, children. The others, Madam Deputy Speaker, of course, would be the elderly, persons with disabilities, and in my submission, single mothers with more children perhaps than they could cater for financially and emotionally. Nelson Mandela, who I regard as one of the three greatest individuals of the last century, said that history will judge us by the difference we make in the everyday lives of children. That is the context within which this bill, which we have debated today, is brought for the benefit of our constituents. The Act's purpose, and Madam Deputy Speaker, you would excuse me for repeating some of what some of the previous speakers have said, but there is wisdom in repetition. We're getting repetition from the other side of inaccuracies and falsehoods. So what we're doing here today is repeating the truth, sir, Madam Deputy Speaker, what is in the Act. And the Act's purpose is to protect children from abuse, neglect, to provide for children in need of care and protection, and to promote the welfare of a child. The ultimate objective of this legislation is to have the best interest of the child being given paramount consideration in all matters. And in that, it duplicates and exemplifies other pieces of legislation that previous Barbados Labour Party administrations have passed. For example, the Family Law Act in the early 1980s, which speaks throughout that piece of legislation as having its provisions in the best interest of the child, and the interest of the child being of paramount importance. The safety and welfare of the child, in all cases, shall be given paramount consideration, and in all actions and decisions in relation to the child. Much has been said, Madam, and it is great, Madam Deputy Speaker, that this bill is being brought within the context of Child Month, month of May, in which a lot happens, Madam Deputy Speaker, and in fact I believe that tomorrow is the International Day for the Child. people have exercised their democratic right. And I always say, I will defend people's right to criticize, to oppose, to march up and down the place, to go on brass tacks. But as I said, I also have to be given the right, especially as a parliamentarian within this parliament, to counter what the critics are saying. And I said, and I hold to it, that the critics of this bill, in principle, were talking political foolishness. That is the truth. And I was criticized by someone who I believe is the third vice president of the Democratic Labour Party, and told that I should apologize for saying what I strongly believe is the truth. I defend the right of the other side to criticize, but I also have the right to say that they're talking political foolishness. And that is the engagement, because what they are saying, everything now, every bill being focused, like if you're putting up a straw man to lick it down on gender orientation and sexual identity and all kind of nonsense that is not in the bill. When anybody with some intelligence, far less someone who says that they're a university lecturer, and people who say that, and people who are attorneys at law, on reading this bill, straightforward, simple language, written that anybody could understand, could see that this bill doesn't speak towards any sexual orientation or gender neutrality or identity, or as I said at a political branch meeting, that tomorrow now, somebody gonna go in one of the schools run by the government of Barbados, a boy, and put on a dress, and that gonna be acceptable, and we approve of that. Nothing so in this bill, but almost every Saturday now, some march or the other, and they have the constitutional right to march, on that this government promoting these foreign concepts out of Europe or America. I want to bring them here. Nothing so. Why? I had to read the bill again today just to confirm for about the 50th time that nothing is like that. But everything, the Samoa Agreement, which we signed on the 15th of December, our ambassador to Brussels going to force same-sex marriage in Barbados, similar to this bill. And we undermining the family and parental rights by bringing this bill. And people who I would swear blind have not read the bill. And I have a program on radio, I think twice a week, by some of these, the usual suspects, I want to call them, including an individual who was a member of the other place up to when the last election was called. And thankfully, he's no longer a member, criticizing about the establishment of joint select committees, of which the report is before this parliament of one such committee, that these committees were formed unconstitutionally and breach of the law. I suspect that he too, don't mind he was a parliamentarian, did not read the rules that establish these joint standing committees. If not, he too would not be talking such foolishness. And he ought to know better. The truth. So I am quite embarrassed that I even have to address this here today. And a bill? There's no bill that is perfect. But it is closer to perfection now that it has gone through a joint select committee of parliament, which had 9 sittings, and everybody, the whole of Barbados, invited to come and give written submissions, and oral too. I'm a bit surprised. They I believe only had about 13 or 15 written submissions. People were given the opportunity to come before the committee and engage the committee and have a dialogue, which is what we did in the Policy and Governance Committee with the Cybercrime Bill now before it. But this bill is as good as you can get in the circumstances. There is no undermining of children's rights. The removal of a child from his parents would only become necessary, would only occur when it is necessary to protect that child from the risk of serious harm or danger. And that is where the state must reserve the right to intervene, where a child is at serious harm or danger. And other than that, the state, of course, provides free education for each and every child in this country who wishes it. I mean, it's optional for the parent to send the child to private school. I know I went to government primary school and my 2 children went there too. And I would always advocate the government schools, but if a parent wants to send their child to private school, that is their parental right. And the state provides free health care for children and has to protect the child, and that's ultimately not only the child but all its citizens, and that's ultimately the goal of a government. Other than that, it's up to the parent. But where obviously the welfare of the child and the safety of the child is at risk, the state then has to intervene, and that is what this bill seeks to do. Where Section 31, the director has reasonable grounds to believe that the health and safety of the child is in immediate and imminent jeopardy, the director may, if necessary with the police, take the child into custody. But even when the director does that, within 24 hours, must go to court and apply to court for what I will call a Section 32 order under the bill. And those Section 32 orders are wide, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South indicated this morning. Very wide, 13 such orders that can be applied for depending on the circumstances. And with applying, the director is under a statutory duty, or will be under a statutory duty, to inform the parents of it, so that the parents can appear and obviously be heard in contravention, or rather in opposition to any application for any such order. So this is a nobly reasonable act that also gives the child the entitlement to legal representation, which has to be done. The Child Justice Bill does that as well. And we in the proposed Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act also proposes that legal representation should be given to a person with disability who can't afford it. And in this bill, the child also has the right to a fair hearing and the right to be heard. All of these are safety devices for the protection of the child, which is of paramount importance, and there's no undermining within the scope of things on parental rights, and no attempt whatsoever to bring in any international norms or practices that are foreign to this country. So sometimes I wonder about, as I said, the usual suspects, because it's the same people that opposing everything that this government is bringing. And whether, as I said, I don't believe that they do enough reading, or if they do, they don't understand what they read. And the Convention on the Rights of Children, something that Barbados has signed on to for 34 years, and Barbados under a Democratic Labour Party government, as was said by the Honourable Member for St. Peter. And nothing in that convention either speaks to these sexual orientation and transgender issues, and whether a boy should be able to go in a girl's bathroom at school. And all of these, like if, you want to undermine the stability of a society. And Like I said, I understand opposition politics. Deputy Speaker, you know I understand it because you and I sat down when I first entered Parliament in a 5-year, 3-month period, a Parliament that went on beyond a 5-year period. Between 2013, February 2013 and May 2018, you and I sat down together on this side of Parliament, ma'am, and we understand opposition politics. But I think that as Barbadians, citizens, who I still want to believe want the best for our country, we have a duty, all of us, including opposition, not to spread propaganda for propaganda's sake, and to believe that because you repeat the propaganda, it somehow gathers veracity. It doesn't. And it is time that this stop, and that it is undermining, in my opinion, and taking advantage of Barbadians who they believe do not know better. I wish, Madam Speaker, to spend a few minutes on the genesis of how we're here, and I thank the Honourable Member for Christchurch East to giving me credit for some of this bill. I want to as well claim part ownership of it, because I remember, I think it was in April 2019, we had a meeting at the Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Centre, had about 10 ministers there, of course, chaired by the Honourable Prime Minister, a lot of government officials. It was at that time that there had been an increase in bullying in schools, children getting into fights, and I think knife pulling out in some cases and all of that. And we spent about 12 hours that day, all up in 8 o'clock. We were still at Lloyd Erskine Sandyford Centre, having started at 9, to try to grapple with how you would deal with children who are giving trouble in schools, and you don't want to send a 12-year-old to Dodds or to Somerville, and what alternatives you could have, and whether we should form, a facility center, temporarily remove that child from school, and they go to this center, they're counseled, and they have experts there, psychologists, etc., to try to bring them back. Because as Frederick Douglass said, it is better to try and raise a child properly than to mend a broken man. And this is the result of all of that. A committee was formed, of which I, as then Home Affairs Minister, was chairman of, bringing together the social aspects of it, the care and protection aspects, and the child justice aspects, and how you would divert children as well within the paths away from the Dodds and Somerville, the confinements, under the criminal justice systems. So, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch East said, we had a case where we got an expert in child protection, someone who had assisted drafting the Grenada legislation, a Barbadian, to deal with the Child Protection Act under the funding of the United Nations, one of the United Nations agencies. And this act lagged a bit behind, and of course, we couldn't bring in any other act, the Justice Act, before. So the Protection Act has come before this Parliament. We're behind, as has been noted today, because many CARICOM countries have similar updated child protection legislation. Grenada has, Antigua has, St. Lucia, I believe St. Kitts, and some of those countries as well have combined their Child Protection Act with Adoption Acts. We have chosen to leave it by itself. I suppose the Adoption Act will be looked at a later date, but the reality is that the acts related to child protection, as I said, go back 120 years and are in serious need of reform. And that's what we're doing today. This act establishes a child protection authority, and the ministry, parent ministry, of course, is at present looking to see how it could amalgamate institutions under the ministry. So however this child protection authority comes to be established, the principles and the statutory principles would still be there. And I must say, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I believe the Honourable Member for St. Michael South said earlier when he led the debate, that the Director of the Child Care Board is doing a very good job. I'm impressed with her. I would not have expected otherwise, that's the truth, based on her background and her experience and her training. She's a constituent of mine. And I'm happy to see that the government, through the Ministry of Crime Prevention, has got off the ground now its community parenting program, of which the Honourable Prime Minister first spoke in her budgetary speech last year, that this concept and initiative would have been developed, and is finally being developed, I believe in association too with the Ministry of Youth and Community Development. They had a launch 2 Saturdays ago, and I'm happy to see that has been finally established, so that children and parents, because parents' education is paramount. I often say that you can't really read how to be a good parent or the best parent you can be in a textbook. That is the truth. I have 2 children, both well adults now, and being a parent has been one of the more difficult challenges I've had in life. The truth, a lot is easier. And now, of course, I have a grandchild, 4-year-old, so I regard myself as an expert on parenting. But there are some people who need as much help as possible in terms of parent education. I'm happy that my foundation, the directors, found it fit on my advice to hold a parent education and personal development program, ran for 11 weeks from the end of January to last month, and was highly successful. And every Saturday morning, parents, predominantly female, I must say, would have hoped to have had some more men come in. And looking forward to it every Saturday morning. And Parados involved family planning, a lot of experts, and combining it with financial literacy, national transformation initiative, Ministry of Labour, and other ministries as well, and other experts, National Council for Substance Abuse, the Trust Fund, entrepreneurs. All of this has an impact on what we're talking about today, child care and protection, because it impacts on parents and parents' education. And that's what we're looking at as well. In terms of the opposition, as I said, Ma'am, I, like you, understand opposition politics. But what I don't understand and could never agree to is hypocrisy in politics, hypocrisy in public life. And I might excuse some of those who control one wing or the other of the Democratic Labour Party at the present time. Because some of them are new to politics, some green, never went in Parliament yet, that is the truth. And of course, they aren't being mentored properly, because who gonna mentor them in a state of confusion that is the Democratic Labour Party right now, a lobby group? But, so I excuse them. But the older folk in the Democratic Labour Party well know the last cabinet of the Democratic Labour Party, the last decade, was a lot more than a lot of people know. And I have to say this. When I was Minister of Home Affairs, I saw some files in the Immigration Department whereby people, CARICOM citizens were deported from this country. CARICOM mothers were deported from this country by ministers of immigration, including the then Prime Minister, who for a while occupied the position of Minister of Immigration, were deported from Barbados, knowing well that they had Barbadian-born children. And those children put in homes like Sterling's children's homes. And you talking about a party that cares, and they're talking about care and protection of children, and we got to protect our children, and deported mothers of Barbadian-born children from this country back to Jamaica, back to Guyana, putting those children in Sterling children's homes. I could not believe it. Could not believe it. I cried when I looked. I remember specifically 2 files and said, how could a Minister of Immigration do this? How could someone do this to people of their own color? How could people born within a certain socio-economic group do that to people? That is what happened. They have no moral authority to talk about children. When you do that, none whatsoever. On the files, one thing about system of government. Government is a continuum. And the files are there. And that is what is the legacy of the Democratic Labour Party government. Just because somebody overstayed a time in Barbados, and they're here long because they got 2 children born to Barbadian men in Barbados. And as far as I'm concerned, by that time they're entitled under the Constitution to citizenship of Barbados, and that is what we've been doing. I started it, the Honourable Member for Christchurch, he's continuing it, giving CARICOMs born citizens citizenship of this country where they've been living here over 7 years, because that is what the Constitution says, over 10. But yet they were deported and the children going in children's homes. And you come and they're marching up and down the street talking about children. No. I hate and will not stand for hypocrisy in public life, because I believe in public life you've got to be truthful and have integrity and deal with people as human beings as you would wish them to deal with you. So this is where we are, Madam Deputy Speaker. We have the disabilities policy speaking towards children with disabilities on each and every aspect of their lives, dealing with their education, their health, their access to public spaces. In other words, creating a platform where children with disabilities can realize their full potential, just like how every other citizen, every other child in Barbados is entitled to have the opportunity to realize the full potential as Barbadian citizens. And of course, we would have heard from the Honourable Member for St. Michael South about the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Bill also coming before this House within the foreseeable future. The Select Committee process, I commend it. I commend it as an extremely wise decision to give ordinary citizens of Barbados the opportunity to take part in our democracy and to play a role in the legislative process of this country. We just finished, as I said, hearings on the cybercrime bill. There have been over 40 written submissions. We heard 12 people. And even on that, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have to say, because, you know, this propaganda going out that we allowed the chairman of the Law Reform Commission, who had a role, of course, in the crafting of that cybercrime bill, 2.5 hours to speak, and then others only had 10 minutes. Absolutely not true. Because one of the main critics of the bill, who 5 years ago was supporting the process, saying that we got to get a cybercrime bill, we out to date, but he criticizing it now. But we had him on for 50 minutes because it is, you can't only look at it as your 10-minute presentation, and 10 minutes is a long time, but engaging him. And that's what you want, as the Honourable Member for St. George North spoken, the opportunity to engage. Yesterday, we had one of the critics of some aspects of the bill. He was on for a whole 75 minutes. So when you look at the situation, those who are critical of some aspects of the bill, and there's only probably about 3 clauses that coming up all the time for criticism, had equal time before the committee as the chairman of the Law Reform Commission and the Honourable Minister yesterday and the consultant to the commission. But yet I hearing and seeing on social media and hearing on brass stats, people only had 10 minutes. I mean, this kind of, you know, like if now you're repeating lies and that's going to get you support and votes before you're going to clean up the institution of, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter said, the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, that is now not even a lobby group, that they want to kill each other out there and expel everybody.
Honourable Member, you have 2 minutes, please.
Yes, ma'am. So this bill is a fantastic social transformational bill. The employment of alternative dispute resolution procedures at Section 29 is also something to be commended, because everything can be going in court. And there's a duty on the director to consider such before you go into court for some of these Section 32 orders. So it is part of this party's commitment to protect the most vulnerable. This bill is a fundamental part of such. You know, it's a situation where the government, we're creating institutions and mechanisms to help parents, if necessary, in terms of the raising of their children, but where the best interest of the child has to be paramount. And there's absolutely nothing to fear by any member of the Barbados public about this bill. I'm obliged to you, Madam Chair.